Well, that's what's funny is that I do remember in March when we were both, it was like the week before spring break, and everyone was talking about like we might not be coming back for a week or two. And I thought that was crazy. And I just remember hovering when you and Johnny, one of our other teachers, were talking about it. And y'all were saying like, no, this is gonna be a real thing. And that's why I went home and like bought a bunch of stuff because I was like, oh, if Samuel says it, then it must be true. So hi, welcome to Antisocial Studies. I'm Emily Glankler, and this is part of my series Emily Learns About. And today I'm going to learn about vaccines with Samuel. So, hey, Samuel.
How's it going, Emily? Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah.
I'm excited to tell you all about vaccines. A little bit about myself. I've been teaching high school biology and other sciences for about 13 years now. We've worked the past couple of years together, which has been wonderful. My mom is also has her master's degree in microbiology. So ever since I was a kid, she was always telling me about gross and nasty stuff that could infect us, and the dangers of of a global pandemic.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I've known it. This is old hat for me.
Yeah. A lot of people are talking about the vaccine, the coronavirus vaccine. And there's a lot of like debate about is it safe and should I take it? And I just feel like I wanted to get someone on that knew more than it about me to be like, I think the message is going to be, yes, we should take it. Right?
Yes,
Okay, good.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Vaccines have been around for a little while.
hmm
A little history about kind of how they came to be more mainstream. So science, scientists used to, in the era of smallpox, imagine if you will,
I always do.
pustules forming all over your body, and then you die. And so we're kind of lucky that this isn't that sort of epidemic or pandemic. Um, and so, but what they used to do to help to treat it is the same thing that this vaccine does. It's the same thing that your body naturally does, and that's trigger an immune response. And when they first started to try to do that, they would take someone who had smallpox and do something called variolation, which is they'd find somebody who has smallpox, a mild case, gather some of the pus from the pustules, and then inject it into somebody else. Just a little bit, just a
Did
little
that
pus.
do anything? Did that work?
It triggered an immune response of varying degrees, but the risk of infection, of serious infection from that, was serious, and
Hmm.
so wasn't the best of options. And I couldn't imagine nowadays going into the doctor and like, boy, do I have a treatment for you. Would probably be a little
Is
difficult to convince people to go in.
okay, so vaccines
Um,
are
yes,
basically putting a little bit of it into you so your body goes, get out.
right, right. So Edward Jenner is sort of known. There are many scientists around the world, and with most major scientific discoveries, you'll find that there were like pockets of scientists all over the world just sort of working on the same thing. He was working on the smallpox vaccine and noticed that, well, he amongst others noticed that people who worked with cows um, got a very mild case of cowpox, which is very similar to smallpox. And so he took some samples from a milkmaid and injected an 8-year-old James Phipps, who was the young, happy, healthy boy of Edward Jenner's sharecropper ish, like indentured servant gardener, like very, very poor. And he was like, hey, can I give, can I maybe give your son smallpox? Um, what he did, and this is how like modern day uh, vaccines are made, and we'll talk about kind of the differences between this sort of vaccine and the vaccines that are out for COVID right now. Um, it's what's called an attenuated form of the virus. So they take a little bit, they heat it up, they render the virus sort of inert and water it down and give you a little bit of it. So it triggers an immune response, but there's not enough of the virus to like take hold
hmm
and fully infect you. Um, And so, and there's some ethical questions
Yeah, I
about
was like,
whether
what
or not.
happens to this kid?
Well, he got sort of feverish and sweaty over the course, had some mild symptoms, and then was fine. Uh, and then they tried to give him smallpox, and it didn't take hold. So it worked.
Oh,
Woo!
that's
Lucky,
a
lucky for
I
everyone.
would say a rare happy ending that starts with smallpox.
Yes, yes. And so that's how most of the vaccines that most of all of us are have had in our life, if you've had them, that's sort of how that works with attenuate. You can't don't really say kill the virus because viruses aren't technically alive, but render it inert,
Hmm.
and then triggering that immune response from the actual input of the virus.
Oh, interesting. See, and this makes me think too. Did you say a year, or do you know the year of when he did that with that 8-year-old kid?
17, let's see,
Like,
I have it,
some
1796.
yeah, because I was gonna say, one of my favorite facts is that in Russia, Catherine the Great, who was empress then, she became the first like European monarch to take the smallpox vaccine. And it was a big deal because people in Russia were very superstitious still and were really fearful of taking vaccine because it does seem like a crazy thing to be like, you're gonna inject me with the thing that's gonna kill me. And so Catherine the Great very famously was like very pro science. She was from Germany, so she was a little more woke in the 18th century. And she just very publicly got the vaccine and was like, see, I'm fine. It didn't kill me. So that's really interesting.
I
Okay, so
really like the idea of 18th century woke.
yeah, it's very
What
different.
that
It's a different wokeness. It's a
Yeah.
very authoritarian wokeness. But yeah, I mean, and I think it's interesting to look back and see that like there's always been this fear, which is rational. Like I understand the fear of like not really understanding how it works. I don't really understand quite how it works. And then this pushback of like, but I'm gonna trust that there are people like you out there who do know how it works, and I'm going to trust that if you say I should get it, I'm going to get it. So, okay,
Oh,
so that's
good.
the history. Is there any more like history of kind of older vaccines that you think is important context before we jump into the
Um,
COVID stuff?
well, just that if you look at a timeline of human population growth, we were hovering like 1 billion ish for a really long time, right? And then there's a little dip in a couple times with like the plague and the Great Flu and stuff like that. But otherwise, it was kind of steady. But then, whenever you start looking at modern day science, which is about the advent of immunology or vaccination, poof, we they work, right.
Mm-hmm.
You only have to look at the population curve of humans to know that it works. There's also like trauma things and other stuff, but vaccinations have saved countless and countless lives in human
Yeah,
history.
because that seems like it's the most efficient way to protect human life. Like in terms of what is it, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure or something, right? So in history classes we talk about like, oh, throughout the 19th and 20th centuries you see the rise of all this medical innovation and yada 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 that leads to increased life expectancy, whatever. But the yada 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 is really important because we're finding that more and more people don't trust the yada yada yada, and they don't understand that like no, that's exactly what we're experiencing right now. It's that scientists came up with yes, cures for things, and yes, ways to kind of resolve things that would have been a death sentence and now are not. But yeah, vaccines seem to be the most efficient, like get them to a whole population, and you can't really quantify how many people it saved, but like we
Yes,
have to know it's tons. So
and we've eradicated smallpox from the face of the earth. The only places you see smallpox are in like the CDC in Atlanta and in other like labs, like a handful of labs across the world.
hmm.
Go Google some images of what smallpox looks like, and or what polio, the side effects of polio.
Yeah,
Um, and then you
we could
may or may
just
not. It's difficult to say, because you bring up a good point about just the information that we receive.
mm-hmm.
It's who do you trust, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. I trust
And
the
so,
Aztecs, and let me tell you why. I trust the Aztecs because I have seen their depictions of their people dying of smallpox. and they're horrifying, and they're like drawings. They're not even actual photographs. And so if you don't trust Fauci, do you trust the Aztecs? And if so, come with me. Get a vaccine.
Exactly.
Cut to kind of part 2, which is going to be the modern, like COVID. What's going on with COVID? I want you to explain to me what herd immunity means, because I don't understand it. And so all of that will be in part 2. Thanks.